Restore Britain went and charged into the Makerfield Bi-election, promising to be the real deal, a serious, principled party that would outperform Reform UK. Instead, they delivered one of the most embarrassing results in recent British political history. They got smashed, humiliated, and exposed as a complete flop. The numbers were so bad they even got less support than the BNP managed in its prime, despite the political climate being far more favourable to nationalist ideas today. The Makerfield by-election was supposed to be Restore Britain's big moment. All of that promotion, all of that support that they got from someone like, for example, Elon Musk, all of that promotion online and constant propaganda. A chance to show they could beat Reform UK at its best and establish themselves as the true voice of British nationalism. Instead, they went and folded. Their candidate got just 3,111 votes, a pathetic 6.8%. This wasn't just a bad night for them, it was a complete rejection by the very people they claimed to represent. In today's video, we're breaking down exactly why Restore Britain failed so badly, why both Reform UK got bitten at by the ballot box, and why Rupert Lowe's project is now looking like a serious liability for the broader right. Restore Britain went into Makerfield full of confidence. They believed they could split the right-wing vote and still do well. The result was a disaster. They finished with just 6.8% of the vote, lower than the BNP achieved in many contests during the 2000s. Even though the political environment today is much more open to nationalist ideas, the turnout was also low, yet Restore Britain still couldn't mobilise enough support. This wasn't just a near miss, it was a complete rejection. Reform UK also underperformed in Makerfield. They came second with only just 84.5%, which was better than some expected, but still not enough to win. The reality is that both parties made a strategic mistake by contesting a strong Labour seat. Going into traditional Labour stronghold like Makerfield was always going to be difficult. They should have picked easier ground where they had a better chance of building momentum. Instead, they got bitten by the ballot box. They split the right-wing vote between Reform and Restore Britain, handed Labour an easy win and made both parties look weak. One of the biggest issues with Restore Britain is the type of people it is attracting. Rupert Lowe has brought in a number of cranks and fringe figures who are damaging the party's credibility. There are a number of reports of neo-Nazi elements trying to attach themselves to the project, including something like with Angloid. Though I don't necessarily believe that Angloid is, in quote, a neo-Nazi or a white supremacist, as well as other people like Connor Tomlinson and a few other figures that would be seen as, in quote, in that type of line of thinking. In fact, I probably don't think they actually know what the definition or even what Nazism actually is. This is not just a PR problem, it is a serious long-term threat. If these people are allowed to gain influence, Restore Britain will become toxic and unelectable, quite similar to what happened with the issue when people would basically dogpile Homeland, and after when there was a big massive split in Patriotic Alternative. Lowe's failure to deal with this issue properly shows a lack of seriousness and proper thought, and will cause major problems further down the line. Connor Tomlinson played a significant role in damaging the Homeland Party before jumping ship to help set up Restore Britain. His involvement in undermining Homeland looked suspiciously like an attempt to clear the path for Lowe's new project. This kind of behaviour damages trust across the wider nationalist movement. Too many snakes, too many grasses. Voters can see when people are playing games rather than trying to build something serious. Tomlin's actions made it harder for genuine alternatives to emerge and helped create the conditions for Restore Britain's failure. Rupert Lowe gave a particularly arrogant and hostile interview in the run-up to the by-election. He came across as self-entitled and dismissive of legitimate criticism. Instead of focusing on winning over voters, he spent time attacking other nationalists and acted as if Restore Britain was earned success. This attitude turned people off. It made look more interested in personal status and even maybe trying to get one up on someone like with Nigel Farage than in actually delivering for the British people. Self-entitled leadership is one of the fastest ways to destroy a new political project, and that is demonstrating exactly why. Restore Britain didn't just lose in Makerfield, they proved exactly right that they had no serious support and becoming a liability for the wider right. And especially when a new party gets even less support than BNP did in a more favourable climate. It has no business in pretending to be a serious force. So anyway guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video about me talking about the Makerfield by-election, and obviously people are going to say, oh, I've been negative again, oh, sorry Jack, whatever. But when it comes down to especially this, you know, with, like I said earlier in this video, like with to do with all of the hype behind it, especially, you know, Elon Musk pushing and promoting it, and obviously I think that Elon is just a chronically on man's spag. And the way he comes across as well when he was promoting this party, he was saying that, oh, Farage was weak, but all of a sudden, before that, he was basically just, you know, being in support of Nigel Farage, and now all of a sudden he's, you know, trying to be supporting someone like Restore Britain. I mean, he's a Zaya bot anyway, so let's be honest, who actually gives a shit what Elon Musk thinks, you know, essentially that's what X is basically just a propaganda outlet for Zionism, but I won't get into that too much. But when it comes down to this vote, you know, especially with all the hype around it, especially like with young Bob, trying to basically, I don't even know what he was actually doing. What ended up happening was that there was this bus that said Muslims for Reform. And I just keep thinking this was just kind of an immature stunt that also had involved with someone like the likes of Kai Stevens. And obviously Kai was even there because I think what happened was that he basically failed with the British Democrats. And what I ended up doing was that essentially that, yeah, but let's be honest, he came last in the local elections, I think, this year. And he got 77 votes. So that's why, you know, he's been a bit of a political prostitute. And especially when it came down to all the parties that he was been in before, you know, he was in PA, Homeland, and now the British Dems, and then pretty much trying to eye up another failed political Tory Zionist safety valve operation, like something like with Restore Britain, because he's basically not getting enough clout off other people online. So if he's in support of it, then he probably most likely will eventually leave the British Dems, and then basically could become a political prostitute, like what happened with Steve Laws. And obviously when it comes down to winning only 6.8%, which was less than what BNP did, is just completely and utterly embarrassing. And I just keep thinking that, you know, all of these people that were involved, especially that stunt that happened with the van, was just completely immature. It was kind of childish and basically didn't really help them. In fact, if anything, it massively backfired. He even had the video even taken down, especially young Bob and Kai Stevens went, and I think it was a third one, but I can't remember his name, went and took down the post. And when it comes down to all of this, you know, cringy Zoomers that are in support of this party, and you just look at who's attracting it, especially now, obviously, you know, nowadays everyone's called a neo-Nazi. I know I shouldn't use that word because it's kind of a slur to use on white people, you know, have like a mild criticism of immigration, but when it actually comes down to, you know, all of these cranks, and if you look at someone like, for example, the Daily Agenda, where he's basically had people attacking him, he's had multiple people that he's talked about on his channel, where all of these people have been like very nasty, like, oh, there won't be support of the Tory safety valve operation, including like someone like with Eddie Stampton, who was threatening his elderly mother, which is just disgusting and atrocious behaviour. These people should not be a part of any party. In fact, they should be ostracised and just completely and utterly removed. And when you've got people like that in your party, especially attracting Restore, and as well, this is what happened, like I said, with Herman, where there was a few cranks in there. Like, I've only had one issue with one person, but the majority of people in Herman were decent. But the problem that I'm seeing is that it's attracting, like I said, with the people who are attacking Daily Agenda, and those people completely failed to assassinate his character. You know, they basically went and tried to do as many nasty things as possible to try and get him to shut up, and they completely failed. And look at what's happened. Look at what's happened to all of these people that have been in support of Restore. You can't even beat what the BNP got many years ago, when basically they didn't have any social media. They literally just relied on maybe their website and maybe doing something like leafleting and canvassing to door. And because of all this, like I said, it was just completely cringe. All these Zoomers basically just kind of proved that they're complete failures. And people really want me. And obviously, you could say and argue that, oh, that 6.8 isn't that bad. But when you're competing against Reform, well, so did the BNP when they competed against their predecessor, which was the Conservative Party. And if it's trying to be bigged up as this next biggest thing, it's going to be bigger than Homeland, oh my god. And then they can't even beat, something like I said before, with Reform. And when it comes down to Reform, they also failed, and this is a problem when you try to go into bigger strongholds, especially with a strong Labour seat. It would have been better, I think, let's say, that people would be inclined, more likely to be voting for Reform, but I think a lot of the numbers have kind of exaggerated of Reform supporters. Like, obviously, if I look on maps, for example, like the last time I did, more people inclined to vote Reform, but maybe on maybe a smaller scale data, it really just shows maybe there is not as much support of Reform than it is, because like I said, it's very ugly under the hood. Underneath, it's very dysfunctional, especially what happened with they lost 38 Kent County councillors a couple of months ago, or I think last year, and then ended up bumping the council tax up by 5%. So when there's all this dysfunction going underneath and non-proper serious policy planning, and also to do with not off proper direction of a political party, it just ends up becoming a complete mess. Restore Britain, other than the cranks, there probably are some decent people in there, especially like what happened to Rebecca Shepherd. And she basically ran for the seat, and what ended up happening was that someone like Connor Tomlinson just went and threw her under the bus. They basically said to her, oh, she wasn't a strong enough candidate. So my question is to someone like with Connor Tomlinson, who on earth could have actually done better than someone like Rebecca Shepherd? Because I actually saw that video that BritBoy did, where it was like this edit of this horse, because obviously she's into horses. She's basically like a working class woman, likes to do activities, just normal stuff that would actually be attractive to the actual electorate. But the problem is that if you throw someone running for elections, you actually just throw them on the bus, and people say, oh, look, all this online promotion by Resort. Well, first off, it's just algorithm circle jerking. 2, again, it's promoted by Elon Musk. And 3, as well, like majority of the Zoomers that are in support of it online are basically just clueless idiots. And to be honest, because it's majority online, you're not going to actually reach people as much. This is what I actually said with Homeland. You got to do some things with offline. You got to do community politics, speak to people. And there are some people that actually did this, including Alan Boyd. I will have to give him that. I do think that when all of these people are attracting these, some very ugly characters per se, personality-wise, and because of this, it's just going to make Restore very dysfunctional and a complete failure and a complete mess. So hopefully that these Zoomers have actually learned a lesson to not going guns blazing, not going out without a plan, and the problem with these Zoomers is that pretty much that they're just not going to listen. They're basically just going to let their ego take over and try and get some clout offline, especially what happened with young Bob, who was recently assaulted by lefties. And the problem is that when they're doing these stupid political stunts, especially like going into towns and trying to argue with people, if you look at young Bob, he's clearly just trying to emulate Charlie Kirk, doing the Christ cookery stuff, the usual. And because of this, all of this has basically turned out, and you will end up getting seriously hurt or even, very, very heavily injured. And someone like with young Bob, to be honest, I looked at a lot of the lefties that were attacking him, and it kind of reminded me what happened when I went to the last Homeland annual general meet this year, and basically what ended up happening, last year. And basically what ended up happening where there were a bunch of Antifa there, and basically when they were trying to push them out, one of the security guards I spoke to said that apparently it was like pushing one of those high school type of skeletons, where you're learning anatomy in class, you have to push it. they're pretty weak. So someone like with young Bob, he's got Roblox head, maybe could take it off and boot them in the face with them or something. I'm being hyperbolic. But I guess what I'm trying to say is with young Bob, he should have had some security there or learn how to actually defend himself. Of course, the police wouldn't help him. Maybe there should have been some direct action units gone in and just went and try and finish the job. But when it comes down to someone like him, he's basically just trying to chase clout. He's basically just doing it to, I don't know whether to fulfill his own ego, as I said before, with these Zoomer type people and in quote nationalists. And as well, if you want to go, link in the description below with links to my channels and Discord as well.